Hello, everyone from Right to Give. This is our first series of interviews we'll be doing over the next few weeks, and it's a pleasure to have with me today Laura Petoom. Nice to meet you, and thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I'm just going to read a little bio that I have about Laura, so some of you, if you haven't Googled her already and seen the book that she's wrote and a book that's coming out, you'll have a little more information. Laura grew up as part of a large family of a book of readers and singers. She has two younger sisters and often took care of everyone in the neighborhood. By storytelling and reading aloud, we're often part of this entertainment. Her favorite stories to read were ones of ordinary children stumbling into something magical. After many years working as an editor and helping other authors to make their stories better, Laura wrote and published her first novel, Mermaid in the Bathtub. She lives in the Greater Toronto Area in Ontario, Canada, and splits her time between editing and writing. Her next book, The Richly Rewarding Adventures of Super Paperboy, will be published this fall. Exciting. So thank you so much. So I'm going to start off with the first question of how long have you been an author? You've mentioned a couple of things in your bio, but how long would you say you've been an author?
Well, that depends on how you define author. Because anyone who writes something and releases it into the world to be read by others is an author.
Definitely.
If you mean the first time I saw something I'd written with my name in it actually printed in a publication, that would be when I was 12. And I had written a book review for this magazine when I was 10. It's called Cricket Magazine.
Oh, wow, very cool.
The magazine was brand new at the time, and they had asked kids to send in book reviews. So here is my book review of Island of the Blue Dolphins that I wrote when I was 10, and it was published when I was 12.
Very cool. That is really neat. I love how you said that too, that anytime you write something, you are an author, and that is right. No matter what you're writing, you are.
Yeah.
Awesome. So when you're writing, do you have a special spot that you like to go to write your stories?
Well, I'm in it right now. This is my home office where I do my editing and my writing. I'm not one of those people who can go anywhere and write. There's something about this space. I have a bulletin board right in front of me that has all the little things that inspire me, quotes from other writers, pictures, some of my children, funny things. So, for example, I'll take this down from my bulletin board. This was a birthday card some publishing friend of mine made for my husband. It's modeled on a book that my husband and I wrote together called Maps and Mapping for Canadian Kids, which I have in my pile here. Here's the book.
Awesome.
And they did this birthday card for him that's kind of modeled on it. There's my husband's face. And it always makes me smile. So that's up on my bulletin board. And there you can see all the bookshelves with books that inspire me. They're all over my house, really.
Awesome. Very neat. So how long did it take you to write your first book?
Well, Mermaid in the Bathtub took about 10 years from idea to book. But that's because I was very busy being a mom and working as an editor. And it started as a conversation at a publishing party with the illustrator, Jane Fernandez, who's a friend of mine. And at the time I was living in a neighborhood that had a beautiful fish shop. And so I said to Jane, you know, sometimes I'm walking past that fish shop and I imagine, what would happen if you were the owner of the fish shop and you opened a crate and there was a mermaid inside? She said, you should write that book. So I tried writing it as a picture book first, but I found out I have way too much to say. So it became a novel. And my friend Jane illustrated it.
Very cool. That's neat. I think it's good for kids to see, for all of you out there that are watching, that books can take a long time, and it's good to edit them and go through them and find those good parts in there too. Awesome. Did you have, when you were growing up, a lot of our kids that are watching here today, they're all in primary, elementary. So do you have a book that was your favorite, maybe when you were in grade 1 or 2 or 3 that you remember?
I have this book still. It's called That's What Friends Are For, that my mom used to read to me. I loved this book, and I still keep it because it's very dear to me. It was about Theodore the elephant who had a date to meet a friend, but he hurt his ankle. And one by one, all kinds of animals come and offer advice, but it's not very good advice because it all relies on things that he's not able to do. And in the end, the wise lion comes and says, you guys are all crazy. You don't give advice, you help your friends. And I loved the little poem that finished the book. To give advice is very nice, but friends can do much more. Friends should always help a friend. That's what friends are for.
Oh, very great message in there too for the kids that are watching. Awesome. What's your favorite part about writing?
You know, I would have to say that my favorite part about writing is having written, because sometimes it's really hard to write your first draft because you have a beautiful vision in your head of what you want, and sometimes your writing doesn't do what you want it to do, and that can be so frustrating. And it's much easier to take something you've written and make it better than start with nothing and produce something. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's great advice too. I think I already have some questions coming through, so I'm actually going to put it through to the kids that are out there.
All right.
That would like to ask you some questions about your experience as an author.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a reminder to everyone, if for your teachers out there, if you want to take any questions, just put it into the chat box and I will pull it up and read it here. So forgive me here while my eyes are probably all over the place while I read. Let me see here. They said, hello, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, it's great meeting you. Keep going down here. Thank you, hello. Oh, here's one. So you're close in Toronto. Have you always lived in Toronto?
No, I have lived in Aurora, north of where I live now. I have lived in Burnaby, BC, a suburb of Vancouver. I've lived in Edmonton, Alberta, and I've lived in Stockholm, Sweden.
Wow, so awesome. So lots of inspiration for your books probably along the way. This question here from Debbie McLean says, what inspired you to be a writer?
I think that it's not so much I was inspired to be a writer as I have so many stories in my head and sometimes they just have to come out. And writing's the only way to make them come out other than telling people.
Okay, very good. And I have another question here. Sharang from, this is that guy's up here. Sharang from Mrs. Kran's class is asking, how do you publish your book?
Well, publishing is a partnership between a writer and a publishing company, and the publishing company involves lots of people. To make a book like this, first of all, there was my friend Jane who was reading it for me and giving me advice, and there was me, and there was me reading it to my children, and then when it went to the publisher, there's the acquiring editor who reads the manuscript and says, well, it's okay, and then goes and brings it to the board who decide they want to publish it, and then they assign me an editor, and then the editor tells me what's wrong with the book, and I get mad, but I don't say anything. I just stomp around the house for a while, and then I realize, the editor's right, I have to work harder. So there's a lot of people involved.
Yeah, definitely. We have a question here from Birchwood Dunes in Wasaga Beach. Why did you want to be an author?
As I explained, there's a lot of stories in my head, but one of the things I love about being a published writer is meeting the readers of my books, because that gives me so much joy when I know that something I've written has entertained someone, inspired someone, or just made them think differently about their life for a while.
Awesome. And then this is a question here. Obviously, you have a ton of ideas. A question came in that said, how do you organize your ideas for writing before you actually start writing? So do you have any ways to organize?
That's a really good question. There's a lot of, it actually kind of depends on what you're writing. So for example, with Maps and Mapping, this is a nonfiction book, and with that you start by drawing up a brainstorming list, just like you do in school, about what you want to tell your reader about the subject that you're writing about. So for this, I just wrote down all the things that I wanted readers to know about maps and mapping. And I did that with my co-writer, who's my husband, who's a cartographer, Paul Heersink. So we sat down and decided what readers should know about mapping. And it was being reorganized like almost till the last day, because you want the ideas to flow naturally, but sometimes you need to explain one thing before you can get to the next thing. So it's a process of constant organization. But with fiction, sometimes you don't want to know how the story's going to end, because the story's going to tell you. You don't want to organize that too much. You organize how you convey character and plot, but other than that, you hold it lightly, because sometimes your story will surprise you.
It's true, and that's what's great about in a Right to Give. We have all these different classes working on one story, and it's so exciting to see the start of the story and then read the problem from a total different school and a solution, and the amount of creativity that comes into the story. And oftentimes all the stories I have no idea how they're going to end, and they're totally ended in a way that I couldn't even imagine, which is
and that's the exciting part of writing, that you don't know how it's going to end always.
No, and so much creativity that goes into
it.
All right, here I have, let me just see. Here. For Birchwood Dunes, they were asking, what advice would you give to children who would like to be an author?
I would say that the best advice I can give is to pay attention and pursue your ideas. Because I think lots of people have ideas, but not everyone immediately writes them down in a little notebook or in a computer file, whatever works best for you, or takes the picture that made you think of the story idea and pastes it somewhere, so that later, when you have time to write, it's there and you can remind yourself and you'll be off to the races. If you keep a writer's inspiration notebook, you will help yourself a great deal.
Awesome, great job. We said here, we've had this a question a couple of times, how many books have you published? You mentioned the bio.
Well, there's these two that you could buy in a bookstore, but I have published many, many books for educational presses. So not just books, but here's a play that I wrote that is read and performed by classes with their teachers. And here is an interview with a private investigator that I did that's also shared by classes. Here's a series of advertisements and letters in response to the advertisement that I wrote. A little kindergarten book called Somebody Cared for a Flower. Another kindergarten book called Why Did the Chicken Cross the Road? And a nonfiction book about how creatures clean themselves. These are all published by Scholastic Education as part of a literacy program. So there's many different ways to publish.
Yeah, the Scholastic Education has been wonderful for us here at Right to Give by publishing or helping us with a book a year. And that's how I was introduced to Laura, was from Scholastic Education. And I know they have a ton of kids' books and resources that I used in my grade 1 classroom as well.
Good. Well, I'm one of the people who's producing them, so there you go.
Awesome, and probably for many teachers out there too, they've read them to their class.
Yeah.
Another question here says, do you ever get tired of writing books?
Sometimes when it's an effort, when I leave my desk a little bit frustrated thinking, I know I want my character to end up here, but I don't know how to get him there. That can be very, very frustrating. And of course, it can be frustrating when something you've written is not, for example, my Super Paperboy book, it's been rejected a few times including by Scholastic, because it just didn't fit what they were doing. So it can be frustrating when a project you believe in isn't receiving the welcome that you want it to.
Yeah, and it's, what was it, a lot of the big authors, they put their work in and it is rejected numerous times before it gets.
And sometimes it has nothing to do with the quality of your work, but sometimes it does. And I have to say that the process of submitting it and having it rejected has forced me to improve my work a great deal. And I'm happier with it now than I was in the beginning of the process.
All right, I have a question here that says, who inspired you to write? Were your parents writers?
My father is a writer, and my mother is a great storyteller. But I think what inspired me the most is reading. Reading gave me such pleasure and such an adventure growing up that I want to give back to kids what I experienced.
Very cool. And a question here. Okay, oh, sorry, I just went down. They're all coming. What is one of your favorite twist endings?
Oh, I just read a wonderful children's book, but I'm afraid that it'll be a spoiler. Okay, anyone who doesn't like spoilers better plug your ears now, because I'm going to tell you, it turns out that one of the main characters is a ghost, and I was so surprised. I did not expect it at all.
All right, cool. And then we had a question here. How do you find the time to write? It sounds like you're busy. Do you set aside time to write, or how do you find the time?
That's a really good question, because you know what? Writers are great procrastinators, because sometimes, I'll tell you a secret, and many people call it different things. I call it the cloud. When writing's going well, it seems to come all by itself. But to get to that point, I have to climb Jack's beanstalk up to this cloud in the sky. Once I'm there, it's good, but getting there is a huge effort. And I will do anything rather than put in the effort to get there sometimes. So I read a lot about how writers manage this problem, and it seems to come down to discipline. Writers just say, the writing comes first. I get up early before anyone else is up, and I make myself sit down and write. Even if it's nonsense for an hour, I make myself do it every day. So far, I haven't managed that, but I'm trying.
So would you say your most productive time for you is in the morning, or is it later at night, or is there a certain time of day where you find?
My most productive time is from 10 to 3 every day. I'm not a morning person or a night person. I'm a middle of the day person.
All right, have some more come in here. Did you have a favorite book or a favorite author?
Growing up?
It doesn't say, so maybe you talked about one growing up. Did you have a favorite author or book now?
I would have to say that my all-time favorite author is Diana Wynne Jones, the late lamented Diana Wynne Jones. The kids I'm talking to today are maybe a little young for her books yet, but start with one called Charmed Life. It is so delightful, and she uses magic and the ideas of magical worlds so creatively that it actually has shaped my imagination.
Awesome. All right, and we had a question here that said, let me just go back onto here. How many people go into writing a book? So the author, I think they're looking for the author.
There's an author, sometimes there's an illustrator, the publisher, there will be an acquiring editor, and then there's the editor they assign you to help you improve your book. There will be a proofreader and possibly even a copy editor as well. There will be someone doing the design, the cover, and putting the book together to make it look like a book. And then it'll go to the printer, and the printer has all kinds of staff on the printing press and people putting the books into boxes. And then once the book is published, there's publicists who get the word out there about the book and who organize tours if there's going to be a tour. There's people in the warehouse making sure that the books get shipped out to bookstores and to schools.
Very cool. And for teachers out there too, make sure you check our resource area, because I put a PowerPoint in this year that shows the process of our books and how we make them and how they go to each school and kind of what happens with that too, that will help your kids. All right, a couple more questions before we wrap up. I have one here from Birchwood Dunes. They want to know, have you ever written any sports books?
I have not written any sports books because I don't know a lot about sports. However, when I do, I have in mind a book that involves a swimmer. So, and possibly synchronized swimming. So that's in my mind. But I have, as an editor, edited a few sports books, particularly ones about a soccer player. And that was a really good book that I enjoyed working on it.
All right. And then one more here. Are the characters and settings you write based on your own personal experiences?
Well, as I said, the Mermaid in the Bathtub book was inspired by an actual fish shop that I passed frequently. It was in my neighborhood. I would say that generally yes, because it's hard to describe something that you haven't experienced. So you kind of can't help that because of, unless you're writing complete fantasy, but even then, in order to make it real, it has to be real to you. And the only way for something to be real to you is for it to be informed by real experience.
All right. And I'll take this last two questions here come in. Have you ever thought that you would be a writer when you were younger?
I think in my heart of hearts, I really, really hoped that I would. So it makes me very happy to see a book I've written on a shelf, not so much in a bookstore, but in a library, because libraries were my favorite place and still are. And to see a book that I've written on a library shelf makes me very, very happy.
Awesome. Thank you. Last question here. Swin, why, we kind of touched on it a bit, but why did you want to become an author?
As I mentioned, because I wanted to give back to the world of reading and writing that I took so much from growing up. Certainly not for the money, because I'm going to be quite frank and say it's actually very hard to make a living as a writer. You need other jobs to support yourself. And now, something that I didn't know when I was young, but now that I'm a writer, I know, it's meeting my readers. That's a lot of fun. And meeting you all today this way online is really, really great. And I wish we'd had this opportunity when I was growing up, because it would have made writing and reading so much more real to me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I know
You're welcome.
Kids that are online have enjoyed it, but also those that aren't here because they're in Japan or Hong Kong, where they're writing there, the time difference doesn't allow it, so they'll love watching you as well. Thank you so much to all the kids that are out there who have watched, and the teachers for tuning in today and taking time out of your day for this. Make sure you keep an eye on your inbox. We will be interviewing an editor as well as an illustrator in the next few weeks in the same format where you'll get a chance to ask questions as well. So thank you to all of you for joining us. If you want to give any shout outs, I can shout out to a lot of the schools that are here. Just say hi in the chat box if you have any last messages to us. And then we will stop the recording. So Dufferin School, thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks for all your great questions, everyone.
Yeah, thank you to all of you. Lots of thank yous, thank yous. See you soon. So thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.